So welcome to today's social system mapping OnRamp session, August 9th, 2021. Your hosts today are me, Christine Capra, founder of sumApp and Greater Than the Sum, and Kara Martner, who's our tech support producer person and helps me in a lot of ways. We have 4 social system mapping sessions every month, so just about every Monday morning. The first one is a sense-making session where we learn together how to make sense of the maps that we've already made. Today is the second Monday, which is an OnRamp, which is usually an introduction to social system mapping for new people who would like to just see a social system map. And today we're going to look at Drew Mackie, his map, which of the Octopus Community Network and Collaborators map. The third Monday, we usually have a deep dive conversation where we dig into something related to social system mapping. And given that this topic has been up for a number of us that I'm aware of recently, this week we're going to talk, or next week, the topic is going to be, what might a trauma-informed social system map look like? Or what would we even need to begin to think about and bring to the table to even begin to imagine what a trauma-informed social system map might look like. But clearly trauma-informed networks are important, so mapping them, having some sense of mapping with them must be important as well. That will be very exploratory. That's next Monday. And then on the 4th Monday of the month, we have a tech talk, and this month it will be just, again, open questions and answers about technology. So if you're wearing a mapper hat, feel free to join us and get questions answered. So we have a lot of places to learn more, and I'm going to just open up my chat. Yes, and Kara is putting lots of resources for further learning into the chat. Don't worry about opening them now if you are just wanting to focus. We'll do a follow-up email within the next 48 hours with a recording of the session and all the links and all the documents that were provided in the session. But if you're impatient and want to jump in, the links are there now. Okay, we also have recordings of recent sessions on our knowledge base, and I'm available to be a thought partner every Thursday from 4 to 4:30 Central, p.m. Central. So, where are we? So for today's agenda, let's just, we'll do some quick chat intros in a second, and then we'll hand it over to Drew to present his map. And once he's done presenting, we will open it up to questions and answers. And for those of you who haven't joined us before, we always have the formal session will go to the top of the hour. And so at the top of the hour, everybody who needs to jump off, we'll say goodbye to. We'll take a pause there in our conversation and wish you well for your day. And then anybody who wants to can stick around for an extra half an hour for just open discussion info. If you've got further questions for whomever sticks around, or just things you want to think about. So that's optional at the end. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a minute, and let's just go ahead and have everyone put into the chat their name, pronouns, location. And you might as well, and you can also put into the chat if you have there's a network that you're working with, or you're thinking about mapping, or you're curious about if mapping can help that network. Go ahead and put that in the chat as well, so we can see what everybody's working on. And I see Kathleen joined us. Kathleen, do you want to just do a quick mic check? Just unmute and say hi so we can make sure we can hear you.
Hi, hi.
Hi, hi. Welcome.
Thank you.
Glad you're here.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Good. Okay. And we're just all putting an introduction to ourselves and our networks, at least a primary network, into the chat. And let's, if you're not, read what each other's doing, because it's always really satisfying, encouraging to see what people are working on, because everybody's usually doing really great stuff. Natural climate solutions and web, yeah. Yeah. Nice. Okay, I am going to go ahead and share my screen. Well, I'm just going to actually, I'm going to just, our map presenter today is Drew Mackie. Drew has been one of the longest, earliest sumApp users and one of the most loyal sumApp users. And he actually even helped us fund a change to the data output, because he's so such an avid user. So he's actually helped fund the development somewhat, or helped us find funding for that. And so without further ado, I will hand it over to Drew.
Hi, everybody. I want to apologize for my accent, but it'll be a bit different from the ones you're used to, I think. We'll just go ahead. What I've done is I've put a whole series of slides together because you can often get bandwidth problems in hitting the actual live Kumu maps. So if anybody wants me to dive into Kumu, I can do, but I'm going to show you a slideshow just to explain what we're doing. And one thing I have to say is that I've tried to give the background to this mapping exercise just as much as showing the maps. So you'll see on a number of preliminary slides, we show the program and who we're doing it for and that kind of stuff. Okay, so I'm going to start sharing my screen now. Now everybody understand me? Oh, well, that's a relief. Here's where it all goes. Oh, good God, what's happened here? Hold on. Sorry, I just. I've been taken to a registration screen here. I don't know what's happening. Oh, here we go, I hope. So guys, all right, here we go.
Looks like you're not sharing the right screen.
Well, that's about relief. There we go. Okay, the map I'm going to show you is based on what we've been doing with the Octopus Network in Islington in London. And the title here indicates that we're using sumApp and Kumu for that, but we're also using a program called GraphCommons. I'll explain why we're doing that. I'm doing this along with Siggy, who is also on this call, and basically Siggy is the client. So I have to be on my best behavior. Okay, just a wee bit about me to start with. I'm based in Edinburgh, but I work all over the UK. I'm particularly interested in networks of delivery collaborations, where you have a complex scheme and everybody has to perform and deliver in some kind of way. And what one organization does is dependent on what other organization does. I'm really interested to see how these sorts of networks work. Most of my clients are either community or health-based. And I have to say that at present, about 50% of the maps we're doing are based on COVID of some sort. My main role, apart from helping to build the map, is to train map managers to promote, maintain, and expand the map once I've gone. I'm a consultant, I go away. So I need to be able to leave a map that could be administered by somebody else. I use sumApp to collect the data. I use Kumu to create a detailed map with complex searches and filters and plenty of data in the nodes. But I use GraphCommons to get at the most strategic aspects of the network, looking at the kind of shape and structure and the centrality of nodes, and really trying to get a grip using the GraphCommons handy dashboard of how the network as a whole is working. And also some clients that come to me are already committed to either Kumu or to GraphCommons. So I have to be able to work in both systems. And recently, using funding that I have from the Line Kelly Chase Foundation in the UK, we commissioned sumApp to adapt the system to feed both Kumu and GraphCommons. I'll show you how that works. Okay. That's part of a project to create a UK community of practice and exploration around network mapping. The kind of users that we're working with here are either strategic, they're concerned with the overall performance of the map and the way in which that's structured, the way that clusters form, etc. You know, it's to try and get some grasp of our overall grasp of the network. But we're also working with network builders, network weavers, I think you would call them, working at a much more local level, but who also want to grasp that more strategic aspects of the map. And then at a level below that, we're really working with the map members themselves who may want to search the map in order to get various data about who has assets they may be able to share, etc. So this table gives an idea of the spread of people who might be able to use the map. A bit like the Octopus Network itself, it's composed of community centres in Islington, London, and it works with many other local, regional, national bodies. It's particularly focused at the moment on emergency food provision during the COVID crisis, but it's already used net mapping, and it has staff who already think in terms of networks, and it has already run awareness sessions with local groups on the whole idea of network mapping and why they should become involved in a map like this. To give you an idea of how we're trying to put the whole system together here, right? We're using online surveys through sumApp and also coupling that up with workshops and events, although during COVID, that's been virtually impossible. We're doing a lot of work on what we call internet search. It means if we've got an organization that is going to be on the map, we can actually gain a lot of information by visiting their website, taking descriptions, etc. off their website. And many of those websites will tell you who they collaborate with. So we can start building a map using internet search. And the way we do that is we feed that information into sumApp. So we're not using sumApp there as a data collector, as a survey system. We actually use it as a database that we feed directly. So most of our maps at the moment are hybrid maps. They consist on people who've responded to the online survey and also information to be added to that through sumApp. As you know, sumApp will create a direct link to Kumu, and then it feeds Kumu back into sumApp as the last page of the survey. You can't create that direct link to GraphCommons. You have to download CSV files to be able to build a GraphCommons map. But you can embed GraphCommons in the last page of the survey if you want to as well. So we see GraphCommons as being something that you may visit the map occasionally with to get the most strategic aspects of that. And what we try to do down this side of that diagram is to indicate how the map's used at these various levels. Okay, I won't go into this in huge detail, but this is how we've set the project up with an initial map mainly composed of stuff in GraphCommons. That's partly because it's easy to convert a GraphCommons map into Kumu. It's quite difficult to convert a Kumu map into GraphCommons. We've sent surveys out. Well, mainly Siggy has presented map processes to local groups. We've produced instructions for map users. We've developed various views of the maps. We've set up website embeds. So eventually this will be a public map and people will not have to go in through Kumu or even through sumApp, that the public may be able to access these by the embeds on the Octopus website. We've still got to do a handover map, fully detailed thing for handover and some instructions. So this lot down here is still to be done. That's what the map looks like. Usual Kumu setup, we have the information on the map in general down the left-hand side, and then the map here on the right-hand side. Just indication of how the map's set up. And this is something we show to people who may become map members. But we've coded up the nodes so that square nodes are actually Octopus members. Nodes with a yellow center are involved in emergency food provision. And the rest of the map is I'm sure you're very familiar with, the lines and the way they connect up to the nodes. We have a series of filters at the bottom here, divided into resources, skills, and activities, so people can search the map for these various aspects. And we have a series of scores on the bottom here, which show the number of elements, the number of connections, but also a measure of how connected the map is through the average degree. We use that measure because it's completely independent of map size. So it's not affected by the size of the map. Okay, this shows the Kumu map having been filtered through the resources filter down here, which is set to equipment, and then the activities filter showing community food hubs. And we searched that initially to look at the Mildmay Community Partnership. So what this is showing is nodes with these characteristics that are connected to the Mildmay Community Partnership. And you can see the kind of information that is contained within that node under these various headings. Okay. We can also create, through Kumu, a geographic map. By fitting a bit of code into the Kumu instructions, it will dump the nodes onto an OpenStreetMap map. And doing this, we omit the connections. The reason for that is that you will get a huge number of connections obscuring the map behind. So we eliminate connections at this point. But it doesn't mean that if you click on one of these nodes, it will dim out nodes that are not connected to it and will leave the nodes that are connected to it fully visual on the map. Okay, right, that's Kumu. This is the same map in GraphCommons, and it's derived from the same data as the Kumu map. The visually it's a bit different. GraphCommons will always stream the name of the node to the right of the node, and it will size the lettering according to the size of the node. And as you say, on both these maps, Kumu and GraphCommons, we size the nodes according to their betweenness centrality. So the map's not hugely different from Kumu, but what makes GraphCommons really useful is that, let's show you the GraphCommons data card, which is similar to the kind of thing that I showed on Kumu. But on the other hand, you have a series of nodes that are connected to Caxton House are listed on the right-hand side here. And if you click on one of those, it will take you directly to their data card. So that's quite useful, kind of stepping through the map and looking at various connections there. Yeah, this is what makes GraphCommons really quite useful, because you can produce this map in seconds. You can produce this sort of thing in Kumu, it just takes longer and it's a bit more complex. what this map shows is it shows clusters of nodes as determined by the GraphCommons software. It uses a different system to measure that. It uses the Louvain system rather than the SLPD system that Kumu uses. But what that produces is a kind of a clearer set of clusters. These clusters are non-overlapping, whereas Kumu tries to show overlapping clusters, and that can become visually quite confusing. Well, what it also does, okay, it's listed these nodes here, but it's also, it lists the top 5 nodes for between this. So it shows you the most central nodes on the map here, and it also shows the clusters, and it titles those clusters according to the most central node in that cluster. So if I was in the actual GraphCommons screen at the moment, if I click on that title, it will bring up that cluster. It will dim out the rest of the map and show you just that cluster. And finally, what GraphCommons will also do is it will isolate each of the clusters and show you how connected those are to other clusters. And that's really quite useful in trying to show the sorts of clusters maybe that should be more connected, but actually aren't on your map. And there's work to be done there in the community or in the organization to try and bring these clusters closer together. So that's a quick run through the way that the whole setup is meant to work. And I'll now stop sharing my screen if I can. I'm having trouble with it. I don't use Zoom a lot. I use another program entirely. So,
Kara, I think you can just stop his share as host.
yeah, it's just not. It normally brings up a. Oh, here we go. That's fine. Okay. Yeah, have you done that? Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I'm a technical buffoon now. I realize that. Right?
We appreciate your we just appreciate you, so don't worry about it. So do people, so I'm wondering, first of all, if I have two thoughts in my head. One is just to hear people's questions, and the other one is to see if Siggy has anything she'd like to share about how they use the map and how its impact on their work.
I hope you're going to be polite about this, Siggy.
I didn't say it again, Drew. What did you say?
I didn't catch that.
Drew, I didn't catch the last thing you said.
Oh, I was wondering. Oh, go ahead, Drew.
I just said I hope she's going to be polite about this. That was all I said. But
oh. Yeah, I was asking if you would like to tell us about your experience with the map and just how it's impacted your work.
Hi everyone. We're in the process of, obviously, as Drew said, it took us a while because of COVID, and people are not replying to the survey so that they can be on the map. But we now went around to different community organization and do the presentation, and the feedback we got from that is very high because it's actually very needed in the community, especially everyone work in partnership and collaboration. So this is the best way we can do it visually, especially. So right now it's in a progress, putting everyone on the map, but whoever on the map is really keen to move on. But as Drew said, it took a while to put everyone on the map because of COVID and stuff, and not everyone likes feeling surveyed. That's what we found out, isn't it, Drew? But I have myself, as Octopus, got like 14 community organization as a network, And already I know that how we can be really benefit out of it, because what we do is in any work we're doing right now, we need connection. We need to know that where different assets are in the community. So through the filter system, that I know that it will be very useful only for the 14 community organization to signpost people to different organization and to see collaboration work. And then as a funders, most of the funders in UK now, they're looking to see that if you work in partnership, it doesn't matter that you're saying you're serving 100 people in your community, that doesn't work anymore. Are you actually working with other organizations in the community? How are you connected? So this is really good as a funder. And for me to, when we go to the funding and to get more money to different. So it is really useful. And I don't know, is there anything you want me to add, Drew? I think I've been a good client, right?
Yeah, I'd just like to reinforce one point that Siggy made there, which is that we are finding a really poor response to surveys during COVID. Pre-COVID, we might get, I don't know, 60% response to a survey. And then we could build on top of that by trying to persuade people to enter it. Now we're getting about 30%. And it's because the organizations we're working with, many community organizations, are just desperately trying to keep themselves alive. So their priorities for surveys have just dropped off the edge of the table. So that's why the maps I've showed you are basically hybrid maps. They're based on our own research, but they're also based on survey. And we're using sumApp to pull these two streams of data together.
Yeah, thanks. Does anybody have any questions? I'm going to actually mute myself and go shut my blinds because the sun is in my face. But if someone has a question, I can hear it, and you can go ahead and ask it of Drew and Siggy.
So I have a question building on what you've already shared, and maybe it's too early, but I'm wondering, do you have any success stories of groups that have discovered each other or collaborated in a new way because of what they've seen on the map?
I'm sorry, I'm afraid I'm pretty deaf actually, so I find it quite difficult to pick up what you were saying there. Could maybe you come and explain that, Christine?
He wanted any success stories that you may have, given that it's still early, but any success stories of collaborations that have developed from the map. Does that, Jonathan, did that summarize it?
Okay. Yeah, I think Siggy's probably better placed to answer that. We're about to take this map public. So up to now, the people that are on the map are either people who have been surveyed or people we've researched. But within the next couple of weeks, the whole thing goes on the Octopus website. So yeah.
I can answer to Jonathan, right? What actually through the workshop I've been doing, or Zoom workshop like similar to what Drew just did, but obviously only simpler one. So through that, people actually notice that they're not connected to organization, which is quite new to them. They haven't been working together, although one of the organization, let's say they're doing a mental health workshops, and then there's another organization who's quite new to them in terms of geographical, that they haven't been connecting. So through that, we can already see in collaboration people, they're really keen to be on the map. And as I said, I can inform you back maybe after 3 months and stuff, seeing that how people are working on it. But it is, it seems like a positive already from what people say, because I'm not on the map, why I'm not connecting to this. And then they actually come back to us saying that I'm on the map, but you're not connecting me to this organization, but I've been working with them, so why you're not connecting me? So it's a positive, so far it's positive, but we will only find out, because this is a community map. So it have different stage. There are people who, local community who can use it, navigate what activities and what organization do. And in that next level is, as Drew said, it would be like us organization, how we can work in collaboration. So there's a different level of using it and understanding how collaboration work is. So I could only come back to you in later days, but I'm happy to report back to you, or Drew will report back to you basically later on. Yeah.
Thank you.
Could I add one thing to that? Because also on the website, we're publishing the opt-in.
Yeah.
So that people who have a look at the website can actually opt in to become a member of the map. So it's going to be interesting to see how that works, because the map may grow in directions that we haven't anticipated at all, purely because of the opt-in. It's the first time we've done that publicly. So
I just wonder if those success stories will help increase people's motivation to fill out the survey.
Yeah, that's the idea, actually. That's why we're actually putting it out live very quickly. Sorry, did I answer your question, Drew? Sorry. I'm excited about it. That's why I'm talking about it. And yeah, it's actually, that's the idea for us to put it up and see, because most people, what we have known is when you look at it, working is when you're actually excited to be on the map, rather than you just show, it looks like a spider web right now, but once you start using it, people will understand, and then we're hoping that we get more people, and I know that we're going to get more people actually.
yeah, one of the stances that we've been taking in inviting people is to say that we have researched your organization on the internet. This is what you say about yourself on your website. So a description and the collaborations you cite come from your websites. That's quite useful to us, because we're subject to what's called GDPR. GDPR is was the European directive on data privacy, and in the UK we are still bound by that. But because that's public information, it's not subject to GDPR. Right? And what we can say to people is, that's what you say about yourself. You come on the map and see what we publish, and if you want to change it, you can change it. So it does give it an incentive for them to come onto the map to make sure the information is being used properly.
Other questions? Stephen, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was curious. Do you think, are you almost seen like a publisher then when you publish this map? It's like you've published some data. Is it like you're a publisher of information when you put it up on a website, if you then share it?
Did you hear that, Drew?
Yeah, you're asking about publishing it on the Octopus website.
Yeah.
All of the information. I mean, the very first question in the questionnaire is, do you agree to your information being used on a network map that may be public? Right? So that kind of clears us there, we hope, for that. And then the other information that is there on the map has been researched from public sources. So we're assuming that everybody there is at least happy with that kind of information being published. I'm not actually sure how this is going to go, because it's the first time I have actually published this kind of network map on a public website. So we need to see how that goes, right? But everybody, we do ask everybody's permission. So it's that they've either given the permission, or it's already public information published on a website.
So just for the sake of us who don't live in Europe and aren't subject to the GDPR, I'm sensing that being a publisher is a specific definition related to sharing data. Is that, I mean, it sounded more specific than I would use the word publisher. So I'm wondering if you can.
Yeah, well, I was just, I suppose it's kind of a broad term, but it makes sense. I mean, you've also got, say you've got the map, could use the map as like a base really, but say you've got something you want to do on a project basis and repurpose for, so I've done something called net map toolkit, which does influence mapping, where you might participate in an influence map. So I could imagine you could lay that data into this map and show, so for instance, if I'm trying to make a water project addressing this part of a country, who would have influence? Do you know what I mean? And then it'd be, so you could then, now that data, you might want to use the map, but you may not want that to be, you might go beyond what you'd want to be public.
Mhm.
If I could come back on that one, I showed the GraphCommons map, right, and the dashboard there, which showed the clustering and the top 5 nodes in terms. Well, theoretically, they're the top 5 nodes in terms of potential influence on the map. Right? So we have been using that kind of system in support of campaigns. So there's a recent campaign to get the council in Greenwich, that's in London, to reverse a decision to remove the funding for disabled people's independent living. The council already taken that. It's a big campaign to get to reverse that decision. And slightly pre-COVID, we held several workshops which fed into a map, which tried to say who is liable to be most influential, who should we be lobbying, what cluster, if there's a cluster here around certain people, you may want to get them all in the same room for some kind of event or whatever, right? So it's looking at the ways you can influence. And I'm actually, for all my sins, writing a paper at the moment on power, mapping power, how power and influence actually can be expressed in networks. I don't like the word power, actually. I prefer influence. That's what, it's a more subtle term, I think. But often you may be trying to lobby not the groups that are opposed to you, but the groups that surround them. You know what I mean? So that you're kind of, the US Army or the US military anyway has a phrase for this, which is fighting networks with networks. And that's kind of what we're trying to do on the campaigning front. Is that?
And I'd like to, go ahead.
Yeah, so no, that can, I think that's really useful. And I think, I mean, they've been looking at this. It's a bit of a challenge to bring it back across, but when it comes to specific questions, it could be interesting to think about, because it might be each question could have a different what's important, right? So for instance, who influences funding streams for ... might have a whole, or who influences people's willingness to buy into a project locally. It's a very set of people, right?
Yeah.
So you can ask specific questions, but it's a different process. It's more done in groups in a room, or it's done like, but it could be that there's somehow, and it may be a lot more confidential stuff comes up, but it's the general architectures could be put together at times.
Yeah, the GraphCommons maps would probably be kept private because they start to show that kind of information, right?
Yeah.
And you don't want to be telling people on the map you're somehow unimportant. So, but there will be people who have more influence on that map. One of the measures we can produce in GraphCommons, which is really useful, is to compare the number of connections a node has said it has with a number of connections other people have cited to it. And often you'll find a huge disparity in those measures. So, and that's usually a measure of somebody who has been an activist 20 years ago. And still thinks they have lots of connections, but actually everybody else has forgotten about them. And that kind of stuff is really useful.
So Drew, you just got mute. Your sound just died, and we have a couple other comments and questions in the chat. Can you, Drew? Can you say something, and we can see if your sound is fixed? Oh, there you are. Okay, something you went out. We have a question in. I mean, I think thanks for all of that, and we can definitely dig into analytics a whole lot with these kind of maps can get really super analytical, which is fun. And I want to, so Claire, I'm gonna read out your question. Drew, Claire wants to know, to what extent are the partnerships or the collaborations in this network formalized? So, so that's one question. And then our other question is, what do they say is the primary value add of the network map to their work? So how formalized are these collaborations and what are they getting from the map?
If I can answer the first, the formality of the connection, as might say, we leave that up to the people on the map, right, to say why they collaborate. Because in the survey, for instance, we asked them two questions. We asked them how often they collaborate, is that occasionally or frequently or constantly. And to my mind, that is preferable to saying how strong is this connection, because people use all sorts of criteria to determine how strong a connection is. So frequency, I think, is a better measure, right? But we also ask them to put in why they connect. So we're kind of letting people define how formal that connection might be by just telling us about it. Really, these maps are just a huge collection of stories about why people collaborate. No?
Yeah.
I've forgotten the second question.
The second one, and maybe this is Siggy's a question more for Siggy, but what is the value add of the network map to their work? So what are the people in the network getting from the map they wouldn't otherwise have?
Yeah, on the as far as the Octopus map is concerned, we don't know yet, right? It's probably not being used by enough people for us to be able to say that, we have a list of stories about how it has benefit individuals. Siggy will probably be able to tell you something more about that. In other maps, though, people have used the map to try and define particular areas where they might operate. We've just done a map for what's called the Ubeli system in Manchester. And Ubeli is an African diaspora organization. So it's trying to connect up all the African origin groups in Manchester. And it's been really interesting there to see how they are now exploring different connections, between groups that they perhaps didn't know about previously. But that's its very, very formative stages at the moment.
Cool.
Okay, do you want to say something about that?
As you said, it's quite early to say anything about in terms of value added, but we anticipate to get in terms of resource, that in terms of, people getting easily to navigate through and connect through, but I can't say it. As Drew said, it's quite early to tell you the actual. Yeah.
So Jonathan has another question that I think, do people ever collect whether a connection was made thanks to sumApp or Kumu to be able to visualize that as well? And I want to throw in that there are a number of networks where the map is made based on an event or whatever the original cause is. I haven't seen anybody ask if a connection was made due to sumApp or Kumu explicitly, but what they will ask is, did you make this connection because of this event or because of this convening or workshop or whatever it was, or gathering? So they will ask, to what degree is their work generating more connections as opposed to the actual technology? But yeah.
Could I give you two examples?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I should give you one example in the way a map is developed. Some time ago, I was asked to map about 70 organizations that attended a workshop in London of various voluntary and community organizations across the whole of London. And we gave people a very basic map of connections we knew existed, and we asked them to draw on paper what their connections were. And then they handed it into me, and I just crashed this in the back of the room, and it was projected on a wall. So people could actually see the map growing over the course of the day. And that, by the way, I think is a great way of getting people to engage with the map and understand where it came from. we've done that in quite a number of projects. It's totally exhausting, I have to say, because you're typing for maybe 6 or 7 hours. Anyway, that event was convened by an organization called the London Voluntary Sector Council, which is disbanded 6 months after the event. It lost its funding, so it's not there any longer. But what we were then able to do is say, well, what happens? Because this is, this is one of the great virtues of network mapping to me, is you use it in what-if situations. Right? So what we said is, okay, if we take that body out, who becomes more central now? So we did that, and that's very easy to do, particularly in GraphCommons. You just switch it off. And it then showed another organization became much more central. That's an organization called HERE. We've just finished a 2-year project with HERE to look at how you start to rebuild some of those relationships across London that became a problem after LBAC went. So that's a kind of outcome of mapping, right, that might not have been there if we hadn't done the project in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Another question. How flexible are definitions of collaboration, i.e. as a funder collaborating with the grantee? I'll answer that, which is, it's very flexible. So sumApp is designed for you to you can define, you define the connection questions, and in tiers 3 and 4, you can have as many connection questions as you want. So you can say, tell us a story about your relationship. Do you, like we've got one project where we're starting to map resource flows. So who gets funding from who and how much, and where do the resources flow through the map? Joe is working on that. And I'm going to just quickly answer the next 2 questions, and then I want to get so that Sarah can get her question in, and then I just want to sort of whip through some questions for a minute. Do maps serve different purposes at different stages of collaboration? Also from Kathleen. Yes, absolutely. Our vision is that the maps just are perpetual, and they're consistently being reiterated. So as we discover, now we need to be asking questions about X and Y, which we weren't before. We can just add that to sumApp. We can add, and we also ask people to go in and update their connections over time, and we can track that. So we have time tagging, so we can see this is what the network looked like in 2016, and here's what it looks like in 2017 and 2018. And as it emerges and evolves, it's going to serve different purposes. And so, and our vision is that we just keep getting deeper and deeper into our understanding of how a map can serve us strategically and how we can use it to develop the network, as well as, sense making at a larger scale than a team, that sort of thing. Sarah.
Maybe add just a wee bit to that, which is in both Kumu and GraphCommons, you can time slice the maps.
Yep.
That you can animate them. You can show a map how the map was in year 2000, how it was in 2005, how is it, and the map will change in front of your eyes. Kumu uses a system where you can just click on particular years on the map. With GraphCommons, they have a slider system, which is really quite interesting, because you can then just slide this up and down and see the map changing in front of you.
Cool. Sarah, you had a question. Do you still have it? You still want to ask?
Yeah, I was curious. Yeah, I was curious to hear a little bit more of the stories of sense making and really the difference in using Kumu versus GraphCommons. Because I'm wondering for myself, like, what are the advantages or disadvantages to one or the other? So I'd just be curious to know, hey, when we used GraphCommons for sense making, here's what it led us to. When we used Kumu for the same mapping purpose and we did some sense making, here's what it led to. I was just curious to hear a little bit more of those stories and differences between the 2 platforms.
I think I picked that up. I have to say, actually, I have a problem with female voices. With the higher register, I tend not to hear as well. So apologies if I mess this up. But it seems to me that Kumu is good if you really want to have a map with lots of detail in the nodes and you want to be able to search and filter that stuff. So as a kind of a visual database, Kumu is great. If on the other hand, you want to appreciate the more strategic aspects, the shape and structure of the map, and you want to keep that at, that's what you're interested in, say, as the overall client for this, then GraphCommons is really good at doing that. One problem we've had on a couple of projects is that as soon as people realize that you can put that detail into the map, they become completely fixated on using the map as a searchable database. To be honest, Kumu may not be the best way of doing that. A big spreadsheet might be better. There are maybe simpler ways of doing that. And the problem is in doing that, they've forgotten the most strategic stuff. So we have to constantly be saying, look, the unique contribution of a network map is it can do social network analysis, it can show you clustering, it can show you centralities, it can do all that stuff, and you can't get that any other way. But you can do that in GraphCommons very easily, and you may not need a Kumu map. So I'm not sure if I'm quite answering your question, but we're starting to be fairly specific about what we will use Kumu for and what we will use GraphCommons for. And it really depends on how strategic a view is demanded by the client.
So I'm wondering if there's anyone who hasn't been able to ask a question yet, or has a burning comment they would like to say or write that we haven't heard from. So I just want to make some space for anybody we haven't heard from who has something they would like to ask or share. And okay. Is anybody else who we have heard from does any comments or any further questions?
I have another question. I've already asked a couple, so I'm happy to wait, Christine, but come back to me if you have a gap.
Let's give it another moment just to see if anyone is needing to find their words and needs us to be quiet while they do. Okay. Well, go ahead and Kathleen. Thanks for waiting.
Of course. Yeah, I guess my question is, I'm new to this universe. I'm excited and daunted by it. But I guess a question I have is, some of the spaces that I'm working in are most definitely emergent, paradigm shifting kinds of spaces. And I'm wondering, to what extent can either the network mapping or the social system mapping help articulate or facilitate what those spaces might look like? So this is a space where you might not have all the data, or you have the data, but you're trying to move it in a different direction. I don't know how to ask that in a less complicated way, but.
Yeah.
Drew?
Okay. I would say that 60% of the clients I have are systems change managers. So they're interested in how to change the system. And one of the things we can offer, either in Kumu or in GraphCommons, is to say, if you change the system in some way, right, what happens to the map? Who becomes more central? Or how do things cluster differently, or whatever? Right? And I think that's really useful. It gives you a kind of laboratory to play with this stuff. Right? To say, if we do such and such, then what are the consequences in influence terms, or in terms of the way that the strategic aspects of the map might work. I think it's more difficult to change the detail that you might get in particular nodes and then get similar kind of what if stuff from that. We have a map of a fictitious town in the UK, a place called Slipham, which we use for experimenting with policy changes and that kind of stuff, just to see what will happen to these fictitious organizations if we change stuff about. So being able to use the maps in that kind of what if situation, I think is really valuable. And that's one of the main uses that I'm interested in terms of network mapping. It's not just, tell me how things work at the moment, but what happens if we change things around?
Right. Okay, great.
And what can go wrong? If we remove certain nodes, how vulnerable is the map to removal of that node? And same with connection. And you need a system that's agile then, that it doesn't take you hours to make these changes. Something you could do in a few minutes, just change it all around and see what happens.
So
I think for that sort of stuff, GraphCommons is better because it's simpler and it's easier to change stuff.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Drew.
Yeah, so we're at the top of the hour, and Joe has a couple questions, but Joe, can you stick around for a few minutes? Or Drew? Okay, for everybody, there's informal after half hour if you want to stay, and I want those who need to leave at the top of the hour to get a decent closure instead of having to sort of sneak away and in at the top. So what I want to do now is hope that Joe's going to stick around and hope that Drew will at least stick around for a few more minutes. And Siggy, but it's not mandatory. We'll do fine with that if you don't. But I just want to say so we'll do our closure ritual now, so that those of you who need to leave feel comfortable leaving. Okay, Joe. Thanks, Joe. Okay, good to know. She's fine. But so what we do now is we all unmute our mics. I'll count down to 3, 2, 1. And when I get to 1, we just all give each other our blessings and greetings and well wishes for the day. And then you feel free to jump off. And if you want to stick around, don't jump off. So everybody unmute. If you want to do this, 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much for being here.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Namaste.